Hi guys, hope wherever you are and whatever you've been doing, you've had a sensational day. Tonight, we'll be sharing 3 top tips to help your children transition back from daylight savings. You know, in Australia, daylight savings is observed in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania, and the ACT. So for our families in Queensland, the Northern Territory and Western Australia, these tips are just as helpful as the daylight hours become shorter and we're moving into those cooler months. You know, the transition at the start of daylight savings is far easier if your child is already in some form of a routine. You know, so when you're actually making those gradual changes to their routine, the transition generally is much easier. You know, newborn babies are usually not affected at the start or finish of daylight savings. However, older babies, toddlers, and young children can be affected for at least a couple weeks. And so you may actually have an overtired little one on your hands as a result. Now, the reason for this is just generally the combination of the change to their body clock, and they find it harder to fall asleep against their body clock. But I've got good news for you. If your baby or toddler isn't in a routine, there's still time to get organised, and at the very least, to at least have some consistent bedtime for the next few days. So to help, we are joined by our very special guest and extraordinaire, who we love it a bits, Bendeich. Now, she's a founder of Dreamwinks and a qualified sleep consultant. Now, Catherine is going to help by providing a step-by-step guide to help get your baby or toddler into a routine before the end of daylight savings. How you doing, Catherine?
Good. Nice to be here. Good to talk to you, Rachel. And these are really useful ways to help with the transition, because I know that, like, when you're just an adult, it's, you know, you can just sleep it off sort of thing, but little ones, it's hard.
Yeah, and this is your area of absolute expertise. And for everyone watching, we're talking offline, so you're going to be on the ABC at 3 a.m., isn't it, on Sunday?
I think it's about 4 a.m. New South Wales time, about 3 a.m. Queensland time on Saturday morning. ABC National Radio. Yeah.
Fantastic, exactly on this topic. So we're lucky enough, we've just recently published your article titled The Transition Back from Daylight Savings. So for some of the parents who may not have read the article yet, could you give us a little bit of an overview of what it's about and what inspired you to write it?
Okay, so I mean, I've got little ones and I've worked with them for 10 years. So I know, like, how difficult it can be. And by observing sort of how babies took to the transition, I sort of found an easy way to ease them into it. Basically, they have a body clock, but they don't know clocks. So if we make adjustments, they sort of, in their head, they know that they go down and they sleep for a certain period of time. So if we slowly make an adjustment, then it usually sees the result by moving it at the other end.
Yep. Great. Well, look, I think everything that we've got will be covered off in the 3 key questions. So we'll probably get straight into those, because everything sort of, I think, flows on from those that's covered in the article. The question number 1, you know, what are the steps we need to make the transition from daylight savings smooth for our children? Please tell us.
All right. So I like to do the transition over a few days. So this one, so the transition back, I like to start it on a Thursday. So, which is tomorrow.
Yes.
So, as I said, your baby doesn't know that it's 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. and things like that. They just know that they go down, and hopefully you've got a little one who sleeps for 12 hours. That might be broken for feeds or whatever. But yeah, who sleeps that. So, in order to get them to sleep later in the mornings, we're going to put them to bed later. But if you just jump to putting them to bed later, you will get an overtired child. Yes. So I like to do a gentle transition. So basically tomorrow, you'd follow your routine completely as normal, but when it comes to the evening feed, if they're still having one, and then bedtime, I'd do it 10 minutes later. So just that little bit. And then the following morning on the Friday, you aim to start your day at 7:20, so 20 minutes later. So hopefully that extra 10 minutes at bedtime helps your little one get, you know, just a bit further in the morning. Don't worry if they don't. Just try to adjust as the day goes on. Try to get your day flowing 20 minutes later. And then on the Friday, I recommend that evening feed and bedtime stretches out another 20 minutes. So that will be
On the
7.
Thursday.
Yeah, on the Friday now. So
Yep.
then they're going to bed at 7:40. So you've stretched it out an extra 20 minutes. So then that 7:40 should, in their head, they sleep around about 12 hours. Aim is to get them up at 7:40 on the Saturday. Again, don't worry if they don't quite make it. Just stretch it out as the day goes on. And then again that night, we're going to stretch it an extra lot of 20 minutes. So the evening feed and bedtime is a whole hour later now. So you're going to go to bed at 8 o'clock. And hopefully that means 12 hours later is the new 7 a.m. So, but don't worry if it doesn't quite go like that. Follow essentially the gist of it, and it'll mean that they adjust much quicker. It might take a few more days, but it's a lot better than a few weeks.
Yeah.
And yeah, the gradual thing just helps their little body clock adjust, and it helps you by doing it in smaller increments, helps avoid that overtiredness. And I actually find parents enjoy this transition more than the transition to daylight savings.
I was going to ask you about that. Yes. Yeah.
Because it's hard getting out and about with a little one because they do get overtired. And a lot of parents, you might want to take them out for dinner, but with a kid who needs to be back in bed at sort of 7 o'clock at night, that kind of restricts where you can go out and eat. And with these 2 nights, like Friday and Saturday, with that later bedtime, it opens up the restaurants that start, serving at 6 p.m. rather than at 5 p.m., which can be much more, kids based. You can go somewhere nice for dinner, have family time, and still get them to bed on time. So I actually find that parents quite like this transition a bit more because it buys them that family time doing something special.
So with the families that you've worked with over the last 10 years, have there been any challenges, pros and cons with this type of approach? And I guess mainly sort of focusing, on the benefits that you sort of find aside from what you've sort of already highlighted.
Yeah, it's mostly pros you're going to get with this approach because it's just gently telling them, because as I said, they just don't know the actual time. They just know when they go to bed, they sleep for a certain sort of period. It's how their body clock's built. Not really any cons, just some babies take a bit longer, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're all individuals. It's just that it's going to take, it might take a week to adjust. It's better than 2 and 3. And because the way that this one works this time of year is if you've got an early riser, that early rising can get earlier if they haven't adjusted. So there's only sort of pros with this. It's only going to help. And what's the worst that happens? It doesn't do that much. It's still better than like doing nothing and probably going backwards.
So let's talk age gaps and ages for the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, is it, like we were saying earlier on in the introduction, from the older babies to toddlers to children, is there any other tips that you've got that you could break down into those age groups, or this is something that you're generally saying to you all age groups?
Most babies, look, it's really only very, very newborns that it's not going to affect because they just have feed, sleep. But once your child's on sort of having awake time, playtime, that sort of thing, then they really are in that 12-hour day, 12-hour night sort of cycle. I mean, of course, everyone will flow differently. Some may have, when they're younger, they have tons of day sleep and things like that, but they're programmed to have 12-hour days and 12-hour nights. Any longer than that for a day is where the overtiredness creeps in. So once they're old enough to have that awake time, then you really do need to do this sort of adjustment, or else you will get really early waking. I do find that once they get past preschool sort of age, then it's not as critical, and you can make the adjustment because they may you may have a child who wakes up at 8 a.m. They may have longer sleep at that point, day sleep. Often once they've dropped their day sleep, it's not as critical. So if your child's having a day sleep, then they're at the age that they need some sort of transition.
Yep. All right, cool. Let's get stuck into question number 2. Now, if parents have missed the start of the transition phase as per this guide, how can parents catch up?
So just you know, you're in your own little family unit, just don't start the clock change. If, say, you get to this on Friday, follow Thursday on Friday and don't turn your clocks till the Monday. It's pretty easy to just keep, like, in terms of the kids' clocks, I mean, you can always do your sort of stuff, but in terms of your kids, just keep them on the old time and do the adjustment to catch up. So if you start on Saturday, just cross out Thursday, write Saturday, and follow the days sort of through that 4-day transition. It really can still be made even a week later. Just make the incremental changes to the bedtimes.
And you're a qualified feeding consultant as well. Do you have any other tips about changing their eating and that sort of stuff as well? Does this affect, I guess, their sleeping patterns?
Well, that's where a good routine comes in, because eating and sleeping sort of flow in a pattern. So if you usually babies following the sort of routines that I work with, you know, you wake and then like an hour later you have your solids. So honestly, if you've moved the sleep times, then it usually moves the whole routine. That's what, when I talk about following the whole day 20 minutes later, well, then their solids like lunch and dinner will be in there 20 minutes later, sort of thing. So
would you say on Thursday to move that first meal time by 20 minutes?
Just the evening, really just the evening milk feed. It really only needs that little adjustment that first night. It's not as big as the other nights. It's just a little adjustment to get them going just a bit later. But yeah, what babies are about, they're about the pattern. So they don't have a clock. So it's for them, it's just the flow of the pattern.
Yeah. So in your experience with families that don't follow these steps and or for what have you, have missed it altogether. So let's fast forward to a week's time. You know, what's the pros and cons of once again, like in not doing something like this? Just to share some context, I guess.
All right. So if you don't follow it, then you're going to get to Sunday and your baby thinks that they're still on, you know, the normal time, the old time, and at 6 a.m. At 7 a.m. is 6 a.m. So if you don't make that adjustment, your child's going to be waking an hour earlier, which, you know, on a weekend probably doesn't affect you that much. But when you start going back to work and you have to get them up for childcare, they're going to be up so much earlier, and then that's going to flow on and make them just really tired.
So that goes into our question number 3 as a perfect segue, which our question number 3 is, and if parents already have children that are waking up early already, this means, as you were just saying, they're going to be waking up an hour earlier with daylight savings. So with regards to what can you suggest to help with early mornings, what's your recommendation?
I see people come to me with what they call early risers, and that can start, you know, that can be a baby waking up at 5 a.m. That 5 a.m. now becomes 4 a.m. and that's, you know, not really available in the family. Exactly, 4 a.m., you know, but you've got to be at work and you've got to start getting the older kids to school for the 9 a.m. and they've already been awake 5 hours. It's just, it's a nightmare. So if you've got an early riser, it just will get earlier. So if you end up with an early riser after this transition, just because your child hasn't adjusted, or you had one before and it's getting even earlier, then it really comes down to addressing early rising, not time change. Obviously, they've got an issue there with waking early. So you need to go through the main sort of things I normally recommend. First of all, make sure your room is blacked out. Babies need that. They have sleep cycles, and when they come through that last sleep cycle of the morning, 5 and then 5:40, if there's light coming into the room, they think it's morning. They think it's time to wake up. So black the room out, and then when they wake up at that time, they think it's nighttime and they slide back into their next sleep cycle. So definitely early rising, you need to black that room out. And the second thing is cold, and especially that's a big thing around this transition time, is because the seasons are changing. And so we're starting to get those chilly nights, which means, you know, those early mornings are where the temp really, you know, is at the lowest. So it might be time to get your heater out and heat the little one's room. Make sure it's not going below 20 degrees. I find that 20 degrees is basically below that is just too cold and they'll get cold from breathing the air in, like, so essentially cold from the inside out. So yeah, and doing a check on your kids' blankets, your bedding, your toggy, sleeping bag, whatever you're using. If do a recheck. If the temps dropped, they may need a bit more. They may need their heater. And then the next thing to that is, if it's still happening after those two, it could be a routine change, or there could be something bigger in there with diet. And that might be, if you've addressed warmth and you've addressed light, and you've maybe given it a week or two to see what happens with the daylight savings transition, and they're still waking early, they've not started to adjust, then that's probably a sign there's something deeper going on and you might need to seek some help.
Yes. Yeah. And who would you suggest in that situation to speak to someone like you, or pediatrician, or who in particular?
Yes, people who specialize in sleep. So yeah, people like me, sleep consultants, are the ones to speak to. So you may want to give them a week or two after the transition, and that way you know whether it's the transition and whether it's the change in seasons, like, because you'll go through that sort of check of the light and the bedding and stuff. But yeah, if it's a matter of them still adjusting, you will notice their sleep times will slowly move later, because you'll be putting them to bed at regular times. And if it's just a matter of them adjusting, you will see that morning time drift later as they get used to it. But if that's not happening and they just keep waking early, then that's a sign that it's not the adjustment. The adjustment might have made it worse because they're waking on the old times. But it's a case of something else is at play.
Right.
So you need to go through everything that can affect sleep and settling, which as a parent can be really hard to know what to look for, which is why sleep consultants exist. This is what we do. And, I can take a look at the big picture as a whole, and it usually jumps out at me what the issues are, and we can fix them pretty quickly.
So your method is the holistic method, isn't it? To look at the high and wide perspective from that perspective. Yeah. And so which is what the feeding, the sleeping,
diet, environment, routine. Yeah. Make sure there's no sleep aids and things like that, how they're falling asleep. So the difference between the way I operate and a lot of other sleep consultants is it's not just about the settling. With me, the settling is the final piece. It's all about the puzzle as a whole, and the majority of that is related to their day, their needs, which their needs are, feeding, bedding, warmth, routine, all of those things. And that's the majority of it. Often those things, they just start sleeping well. So it's not like, there's no point in jumping to settling until you need to do it. And when I say settling, that does not mean a lot of people with sleep consultants jump to that means cry it out, but there's plenty of methods, and I always tailor it to their temperament, your parenting style, and it's always, for me, the client's choice. Yes. I will pros and cons, and I'll offer them options based on their child, but it's always the family's choice. So a lot of people think seeking sleep help means that you're going to do something you're not comfortable with, what people call sleep training. That's not what I do. What I do is working on their life as a whole and everything that affects sleep, and making sure that's all as good as it possibly can be to optimize their chances for good sleep.
Tick all those boxes, hey, make sure that
it's a checklist basically, but a very involved one, but thankfully with my experience I can go through it fairly quickly for you and get them back on track.
100%. Well, you've given us some awesome insights. Now, for everybody watching, we're going to link to Catherine's article at the introduction paragraph to this chat tonight, and you'll actually see that there's a great little chart that she's included from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the chart sort of will give you indication of what you need to do from wake up, day routine, evening feed, and also just the general bedtime as well. So from that perspective, definitely, have a look at that.
Yeah, the other thing that is, if you're one of those people like me who's prone to forgetting things, is if you go on and like my Facebook page, each day I'm going to pop up the change for that day.
Right.
So if you like it and you forget it, like my page and you'll get that prompt each day to make sure you remember to do it.
Sensational. Once again, every time I speak to you, I learn so much. So, and I'm sure everybody else does as well. So, thank you for the insights. I just hope that everybody follows your steps, and once again, sort of has a really nice and easy, smooth transition back to daylight savings. I always say with moving into winter, we should be happy to lose. Happy to gain an hour's sleep, because we gain an hour, and then going into summer, you're happy to lose that hour because you're moving into the warmer months. So, the benefit of moving into winter is the fact that we get an extra hour's sleep, which is a good thing. So it's a win-win all the time. But we've got your point.
Babies to sort of go along with it. It's definitely it's fine, but
if they
don't worry. It takes a little bit longer, but it will be a lot shorter with this transition.
Yeah, 100%. So if anyone's got any questions, whereabouts can they find you? On your Facebook page, like you said, and where else?
So www.dreamwinks.com, and then Dreamwinks is on Facebook. Type in @DreamWinksSleep, and you can send me messages on either of those platforms. I've got a free phone consult you can access through both the Facebook and the web page. To help and find out how I can help you. So there's heaps of ways to contact me, and and keep an eye on the Facebook as well. I do like regular Q&A sessions on there, which can help a lot of mums as well.
Sensational. Thanks for your time. Can't wait to catch up and speak soon. Give my love to the kids, and thanks for the tips. Awesome.
Good to talk to you again.
Bye.